So this is the Nightlord that I'll be painting. It's from the recent Kill Team Nightmare box. I've used the Power Fist from the kit rather than any of the new Nightlord weapons, just because of something I want to try a bit later on in the video. As you can see, I've used a bit of green stuff in the armpit just to push that fist out a little bit from the body, as this will come in useful later. I've also taken a bit of terrain. I can't remember which terrain kit it's from. I just snipped it out and glued it down to the base so that it raises our Nightlord up a bit off the base and gives him a little bit more presence. As always, the first step is priming, and black is the obvious choice here. Once that's fully cured, we're going to start on the blue armour. I'm using AK Dark Prussian Blue here. I've diluted it down and I'm using it through the airbrush. This blue is really nice. It's got a purple undertone that lends itself really well to the Nightlord scheme. I probably diluted it a little bit too much, so it is going on quite thin, and it took me a while to build up the thin layers over the model. I wasn't really that bothered here about being too accurate, but I just wanted to get it on nice and smoothly to go on to the next stages. Whilst I had the airbrush out, I figured I might as well save some time and block in the lighter colours on the fleshy cape and the loincloth. So I started with British khaki and tried really carefully just to hit the right areas. There was slight overspray on the armour, but I figured whilst I was here, I was also do a layer of pale flesh too. And once those were done, I went back and tidied up the blue armour. At this point now, we have the worst part of any painting on any form of Chaos Space Marines, which is the trim. I'm using AK Old Brass here and just carefully painting it in with a good brush.
One eternity later.
And we're done. Next, I'm going to paint all the other metallics with lead belcher. Nothing fancy here, straight out of the pot, but try not to let it set too thickly. I'm doing these now so I can wash all the metallics together with the next paint, which is AK Pure Grime. It's this lovely thick wash and it goes really well on all the metals and gives a really nice tone for the Nightlords. With the metals out of the way, next up is the inner armour joints. For these I kept it really simple. I gave them a coat of Games Workshop Skaven Blight Dinge, and once that dried, gave them a wash with Nuln Oil. This is a super simple way of painting up the rigid shapes in like the elbow and the knee joints. Skaven Blight Dinge is just a great base colour for it, and then once the Nuln Oil sets into those recesses, yeah, it just works really well and is really simple. Carrying on with the detail, it's time for the bones. No self-respecting Nightlord is complete without a few bones. The way I like to paint mine is working from dark to light, so working with AK Grim Brown, going through vampiric flesh into ivory. What I like to do when I'm painting like this is put a blob of each paint onto my palette and then diluting them each with a drop of water and mix an intermediate tone between each paint. This way I can work straight through these colours from dark to light and barely do any blending. It's kind of a rough way of painting, but it's really fun and gritty and quite quick too. The skulls on the wings of the backpack are a really nice place to practice some highlight placement by looking at the shapes and trying to place the paint in the areas I think the light would hit more, mainly upward facing surfaces as you work up through the highlights. For the signature Nightlord wings and some of the other red details like the piping on his helmet, I wasn't sure which reds to use, so I mixed up a bunch of different ones from AK and then just found a dark brownish red for the base and highlighted them up through there. This method of mixing paints and finding different tones is really fun. You'd be surprised by the combinations you can get from mixing even similar colours together. The only downside that it is kind of hard to recreate across the whole army if you don't note down the colours you're mixing. I think it also helps to develop your sense as a painter for what colours and highlights work well together with different tones. For example, a brownish red going up into a pinkish red can look a lot different from a purple red going up into a pinkish red. I also painted the leathers like the belt and gun holster using Grim Brown and added in some off-white for the highlights using the same method as the skulls. I also used this on the threads that join his beautiful skin cape together. But first, for that skin cape and loincloth, I wanted to give them a splotchy skin feel, so I picked out a few different washes from Games Workshop, like Caribou Crimson, Druchii Violet, Chthonian Camoshade and Reikland Fleshshade, and gave each panel of the skin a different wash and followed it up by dabbing it with a cotton bud to create a splotchy, unhealthy feel. Using paints like washes and tools like cotton buds in ways outside of what they're normally used can create some really nice results, and it's really fun to experiment with those kinds of things. With all those bits done, it was on to the trickiest part of painting any Nightlord, their signature lightning bolts. For this, I need a really good brush, so I'm using my Artist Opus Series S size 0, which is my favourite detail brush, and also need 3 blues, going from a medium blue to a light sky blue and into a pastel blue. It's really hard to paint details like this on camera, so I'll apologise now that my head is in some of these shots. To get us started with the bolts, we're going to use the medium blue first. I'm using deep blue from AK, and we're going to paint our lightning bolts. So I like to do mine with nice straight edges and sharp angles, so I'm picking an area like this chest panel here, and I'm basically going to do straight lines with 90-degree turns, or 90-degree-ish turns, and try to be kind of random with the line placement and where the turns appear to give the appearance that the bolt is forking as it goes down the armour. Again, I'm really sorry that my head is in these shots and they're not really in focus, but hopefully you'll still be able to get the idea of the technique. After we've got those initial lines in place, we're going to move up into the sky blue, and this is probably the most delicate part. We're going to try and paint very fine lines in the centres of the lines we've just done with the deep blue. Take your time here and use careful, deliberate strokes. If you go too thick, you can tidy it with the deep blue. Just try not to go outside of that deep blue, otherwise it's a bit of a pain to clean up that. When that's done, just use a tad of snow blue. We're going to do the same as the sky blue, but we're only going to do it in the corners where the bolts fork. So after a lot of careful brushing, here's where we're at. This mini is not far off being done, but next we've got the base, and then we're going to go on to some effects. When I built the mini, I used super glue to attach him to the base. This is really useful as it means I could snap him off to paint the base without his skin cape getting in the way. I want to do something simple but with a bit of contrast to the armour, so I went for the classic Dirty Down Rust. If you haven't seen this paint before, it's amazing stuff. It does need a really good shake. They have a mixing bowl inside, but if the paint's been sitting for a while, it'll get stuck in all this muck and gunge at the bottom, so you have to use a stick or something to get it moving. I have this little metal cocktail stick with a nice skull on it. I acquired this from a Alchemist cocktail bar, and it's perfect for this job. Once the ball is released, make sure to give it a good mix. I have this sports massager that is perfect for mixing paints, so I use that. When it's properly mixed up, just slap it all over the metal part of the base. I avoid the part where his foot is glued down so that I can see more easily where to reattach him later. You can speed up the drying process using a hairdryer, and it looks like magic when you watch it sped up. And you can also add some water to it to create some variety in the rust colours. It looks great as it is, but I wanted to add more variety to the rust and to bring the highlights up a little bit more. So I whipped out the AK Standard Rust liquid pigment and the Extreme Rust enamel washes, slapped those onto the raised edges of the metal area, and then dried that with a hairdryer. And it's starting to look really nice, but it lost a bit of definition, so I wanted to get some of that back. So I watered down some AK Dark Enamel Wash with white spirits and just washed that across the front area to bring back some clear definition in that front piece. For the rest of the base, I used AK Dark Earth and an old brush to apply this around all the metal parts, making sure to clean the base rim before that dries, and also to give it a dip into my favourite, the Rival Crafts Arid Earth basing tub. To add a bit of variety to the mud and to integrate it a bit with the metal, I used dark mud and dry mud liquid pigments from AK, and use these all over the mud and a little bit onto some of the metal too. With that done, I reattached the models to the base with super glue. Now on to some cool, or rather hot, effects. I wanted to make some arcing lightning come off the power fist, so I got this super thin electrical cable from inside a braided wire. Taking a single strand and some tweezers, bent it at random angles till it sort of resembled what I was looking for. You might have seen these from a few other artists like Juan Sanz, who's also known as El Miniaturista. The wire is super fiddly, but I found that the best way to fix it to the armour was to use a toothpick to put a small dot of super glue into the two places where the wire would be attaching, and then just hold it in place with the ends in the dots for a few seconds. Once those were all done, I was on to painting. I'm also going to paint the plasma gun while doing these arcs, so I started off painting the plasma coils and the arc wires in white. Any white will do here. Be careful not to bend the wires while painting. I also filled in the chaos symbol on the power fist and the eye lenses in white too. When they were painted, I took some AK white ink through the airbrush and sprayed a small glow where the arcs joined onto the model and also around the plasma coils. This is a good way to lay down where the glow is going to appear on the models. Following on from that, I used some Green Stuff World fluorescent red to brush the paint coils and the arcs and the eyes and the chaos symbol. This paint is super nice for red glow effects, but it doesn't have great coverage, so make sure to do a few coats to really set down that fluorescent red colour. Next, we're going to use the same fluorescent red through the airbrush. We're going to spray this onto the same glow areas we made with the white. This is going to give the illusion of a really strong red glow in those areas, and will naturally overspray a bit onto the surrounding areas of the model, which will reinforce that illusion. We can also spray some red onto the areas we think would be illuminated by these red glows, so like where the arc is very close to the skin cape along the back, we can spray it onto there too. Then you can go back and just put some touches of white onto some of the kinks in the arcing wire or where it joins onto the model. This is going to reinforce the illusion of those bright parts of the arcing electricity. And we're also going to do this in the bottom of the plasma cores where they meet the horizontal part of the gum. This really helps to sell the effect. If you do take the white too far, don't worry, you can just go over it again with that red fluorescent. Lastly, to properly sell this glow effect, you want to do some edge highlights on the sharp edges that are facing towards the arcs or the plasma, like the chest straps on the armour or the shoulder pads. We're going to do that with the same red fluorescent from Green Stuff World. The final touch list for this model is to paint the base rim black, and we're done. What do you think? Suitably evil? I hope you enjoyed the video, everyone. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time. Bye!